My brother stole my fiancé and my life's work using lies. For revenge, I sought out the only woman he could never forget and made her the love of my life before his very eyes. My life, until that moment, smelled of wood. Not the generic scent of a sawmill or furniture store, but a symphony of specific aromas I had learned to love like a sommelier loves wine. It smelled of the spiced sweetness of freshly cut red cedar, the robust, earthy fragrance of white oak being sanded, and the almost imperceptible citrus perfume of linseed oil I used for the final finish on my creations. My workshop, a spacious and luminous space on the outskirts of Querétaro, wasn't just my workplace, it was my sanctuary, the only place in the world where the chaos of my thoughts organized itself into straight lines, perfect curves, and impeccable joints. I didn't manufacture furniture. I gave it life. Each piece that left my hands told a story, that of the tree it came from and the person it was destined for. I was a craftsman, a custom furniture designer, and I had dedicated the last decade of my life to perfecting my craft, building a reputation based not on mass production, but on exclusivity and soul. Every piece was a conversation between my hands and the wood, a dialogue that spoke of patience, precision, and respect for the material. The workshop itself was a testament to this philosophy. Hand tools hung in perfect order on pegboard walls, each in its designated place. Japanese chisels, their steel gleaming, sat beside Western planes that had been my grandfather's. The smell of different woods mingled in the air, the sweet vanilla of fresh pine shavings, the rich earthiness of walnut dust, the almost medicinal sharpness of teak oil. I had arranged the space so that natural light flooded every corner during the day. Large windows faced north to avoid harsh shadows, and clear-story windows near the ceiling let in soft, even illumination. This wasn't just practical, it was essential for reading the grain, for seeing the subtle color variations that would determine how I approached each piece. My work tables were made from thick maple slabs, surfaces worn smooth by years of projects but still perfectly flat. Against one wall stood my prized possession, a 19th-century European workbench with a massive wooden vise, its jaws lined with leather to protect delicate pieces. This bench had been a gift from my mentor, an elderly craftsman who had taught me that furniture making wasn't just about joining wood, it was about understanding the soul of the tree, respecting its growth patterns, working with its natural tendencies rather than against them. That particular afternoon, the evening sun filtered through the windows, drawing golden rectangles on the polished cement floor covered with a fine layer of sawdust. I was applying the final coat of varnish to the centerpiece of my most ambitious project to date, an imposing conference table made from a single slab of black walnut, destined to be the heart of a new boutique hotel in San Miguel de Allende. The wood grain flowed like a dark and mysterious river, and with each brush stroke, I felt I was polishing the very soul of the piece. The workshop door opened with a soft creak, and the cedar aroma mixed with the floral perfume of Maite, my fiancée. She entered with a smile that could have illuminated the darkest corner of my workshop, carrying a wicker basket. "I brought you food," she said, her voice as soft as the cherry wood I loved working with. "You can't live on wood dust and coffee alone." Maite was a preschool teacher. Her world was full of primary colors, children's laughter, and the infinite patience required to teach kids to tie their shoes. She was the perfect counterpoint to my world of precise angles and silent concentration. As we unwrapped sandwiches and fruit, her eyes settled on the table. She approached with a kind of reverence, not daring to touch it. "It's magnificent, Lisandro. It looks like something from a museum." "Soon it will be in a luxury hotel," I said with pride I didn't try to hide. "It's the most important piece I've made. If they like it, the contract to furnish all 20 suites will be mine." She nodded, but I noticed a fleeting shadow in her gaze, an almost imperceptible hesitation. "Your world is so big, so impressive," she murmured, almost to herself. "Full of important people, breathtaking projects. Sometimes I feel like my little world of children's songs and glitter crafts is insignificant beside it." I embraced her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. "Your world isn't insignificant, Maite. Your world is what gives meaning to mine. You're my anchor. Besides, these important people aren't my world, they're my work. My world is you." That afternoon, as Maite left and I returned to work, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. I had a woman who loved me, a passion that had become my profession, and a future as bright and polished as the walnut table surface. I had no idea that, like the finest wood, my life had a hidden grain, an internal flaw that, under the right pressure, was about to splinter everything into 1,000 pieces. And that pressure, as always, would bear my brother's name. The following Sunday, like almost every Sunday, we drove to my parents' house for the traditional family meal. The house walls were covered with family photos showing two smiling children, my brother Ignacio and me, in a succession of embarrassing haircuts and clothes over the years. Ignacio, or Nacho as my mother called him, was already there when we arrived. He was lying on the living room sofa, talking on his cell phone with that falsely important tone he used when he wanted to impress someone. He wore a brand-name shirt too tight and loafers without socks, his unofficial uniform as a successful real estate agent, though we all knew the reality was much less glamorous. Of course, the closing is imminent. A $3 million penthouse. Small stuff, he said, winking at Maite and me as we entered. During dinner, Ignacio monopolized the conversation, telling exaggerated anecdotes about millionaire clients and exclusive parties. My father nodded occasionally, while my mother listened with absolute devotion, laughing at all the right moments. You should get out more to the real world, Lisandro, Nacho said at one point, giving Maite a complicit elbow. Everyone laughed. I forced another smile. It was his master trick, the insult disguised as a joke, the small public humiliation that, if you complained, made you look bitter and humorless. A couple of weeks later, the money arrived. The first payment from the boutique hotel, a considerable sum that not only validated my work but gave us the financial boost we needed to start planning our life seriously. To celebrate, I decided to organize a small party in my workshop. I cleaned the sawdust, moved the machines to the walls, and hung a string of warm lights between the ceiling beams. With the walnut table as centerpiece, the space transformed from a workplace into a rustic and elegant salon. When most guests had arrived and wine flowed cheerfully, I raised my glass. Thanks to everyone for coming, I began, with Maite beside me, her hand firmly intertwined with mine. As many of you know, this project is very important to me, and receiving the first payment is a major milestone. But tonight we're not just celebrating that. I paused, feeling all eyes on us. We're also celebrating that this wonderful woman has agreed to marry me. An explosion of applause and cheers filled the workshop. Ignacio was the last to approach. He hugged us both in a bear hug. It was about time, champ, he said in my ear. I thought you were going to marry a piece of wood. Congratulations, really. Later, while I talked with Felipe, my best friend, I saw Ignacio leading Maite to a quieter corner of the workshop. From the distance, I saw Nacho talking to her with an intensity that seemed strange. He gesticulated, smiled, leaned toward her, creating a bubble of intimacy that made me feel an uncomfortable knot in my stomach. Felipe, who had followed my gaze, gave me a gentle elbow. Everything okay? Yes, of course, I lied. Nacho's just being Nacho. The snake charmer. Felipe frowned. I don't like how he looks at her. I know that look. It's the look of a salesman who's found a possible crack. You should be careful, Lisandro. Relax, Felipe. Maite is smarter than that. And Nacho is my brother. He wouldn't hurt me. 3 weeks passed in what felt like almost idyllic happiness. The work on the rest of the collection for the boutique hotel advanced at a perfect pace. The day of final delivery was just 48 hours away. That night, I decided to stay late to do a final review. As I walked through the silent workshop, something alerted me. A strange, chemical and acrid smell that didn't belong to my sanctuary of natural aromas. My heart began beating hard. I knelt beside the table and then I saw it. A dark and ugly stain, a meter wide, spread across the center of the grain. The surface, which had been as smooth as glass, was now bubbled and discolored where the chemical had eaten through the finish and begun to penetrate the wood. Someone had deliberately poured chemical solvent on my masterpiece, ruining it irreparably. A strangled cry escaped my throat. This wasn't an accident. It was an act of pure, calculated malice. It was sabotage. At that precise moment, my phone vibrated. It was an email from the boutique hotel manager. Dear Mr. Lisandro, we write with great concern. We have been alerted that your designs, the same ones you presented to us as exclusive, are being offered at a much lower price on a replica furniture website based in China. I clicked the link and there were my designs, my technical drawings, my exact measurements, my material notes. Everything, down to the smallest detail, exposed on a cheap-looking website with ridiculous prices. In the middle of that whirlwind of panic and desperation, there was only one person I needed to call. Maite. Hello? Her voice sounded distant, strangely devoid of emotion. Maite, it's me, I said, my own voice broken. You have to come to the workshop. Something terrible has happened. Someone destroyed the table and leaked my designs. I've lost everything. I expected to hear surprise, concern, rage on my behalf. Instead, there was a long and cold silence. Maite, are you there? Yes, she said finally, and her tone was as sharp as a chisel. I already know, Lisandro. What? How do you already know? Ignacio told me everything, she said, and each word was a blow. He told me how you stole your first designs from an old craftsman you worked for. How your company is on the verge of bankruptcy and you were desperate. He said you probably damaged the table yourself to collect insurance. What the hell are you talking about, Maite? That's crazy. Those are Nacho's lies. Really? Her voice was now loaded with contempt I'd never heard before. Or am I finally seeing who you really are? A liar. A failure hiding behind an artist's facade. Ignacio opened my eyes. I can't marry someone I don't trust. Maite, please. It's over, Lisandro, she interrupted, her voice final, irrevocable. Don't call me again. The rest of the night is a blur in my memory. I sat on my workshop floor, beside the desecrated table, with my gaze lost in nothingness. The chemical smell had mixed with the wood smell, creating a funeral perfume. It was the smell of my life in ruins. At dawn, I drove like an automaton to my parents' house. I found them in the kitchen, having morning coffee. They looked at me, surprised by my appearance. Where is he? My voice was a low growl, unrecognizable. Who, son? Ignacio. Where is your dear Nachito? I went upstairs and entered Nacho's room without knocking. He was deeply asleep. I grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him from the bed. "You did it," I hissed, my face inches from his. "You destroyed my work. You stole my designs. And you lied to Maite." My parents entered the room running. "Lisandro, let him go," my mother screamed. I stood up, trembling with rage. I turned toward them. "Last night, someone entered my workshop and ruined the most important piece of my career. Someone stole all my files and leaked them on the internet to destroy my reputation. And someone filled Maite's head with poison until she broke our engagement. And you know what? Everything points to your perfect son." And then my mother pronounced the words that finished breaking what little remained of my heart. She turned toward me with tired disappointment, as if I were the one who had done something unforgivable. "Lisandro, calm down. Your brother wouldn't do that. Maybe it was an accident, or a jealous competitor. You're stressed, you're not thinking clearly. Ignacio loves you." "It's just a job," she said, her tone now condescending. "You're strong, you always have been. You'll recover. Losing a contract isn't the end of the world. Just a job. You're strong." The same phrases I'd heard all my life. The justifications for minimizing my achievements and excusing Ignacio's misdeeds. I left that house knowing I was completely alone. In that family, I was the foreigner, the one who was wrong for simply pointing out the truth. It was then that Felipe called, not to say "I told you so," but to show me something. Using his technical skills, he had found evidence, router logs showing massive file transfers from my computer the night Nacho stayed over, email metadata linking the sabotage to locations near Ignacio's usual haunts. It wasn't irrefutable proof, but it was enough pieces of a puzzle that, united, drew a very clear picture of my brother's betrayal. Staring at the computer screen, then at the ruined table, a cold and determined anger began to burn in my chest. Felipe was right. I couldn't let him win. And that's when I remembered her name, Alara. In a box of old photographs, I found her image. Alara had been the only serious girlfriend Ignacio ever had. She was intelligent, incredibly ambitious, and had a kind of natural elegance that always seemed to intimidate my brother. The relationship ended badly. Alara left him because she was tired of his pathological jealousy and childish insecurity. I searched for her name on social media. What I found left me breathless. Alara was no longer just an ambitious student. She had become one of the region's most acclaimed chefs, owner of Alma, a high cuisine restaurant in the historic center with a 3-month waiting list. An idea began forming in my mind. If Ignacio had destroyed my world by attacking what I loved most, my work and my relationship, what would be the most effective way to return the blow? Attack his ego. Attack the only thing that really mattered to him, his fragile and overcompensated self-image. And what could be a more devastating blow to his ego than seeing his insignificant brother, whom he had just crushed, not only rising but doing so beside the only woman he could never control? With trembling fingers, I opened the messaging app and wrote, "Hello, Alara. I'm Lisandro, Ignacio's brother. I know this will sound incredibly strange and probably inappropriate, but I need to ask you something. My brother just destroyed my career and my engagement out of pure envy. I know from the way he's always talked about you that you're still his great obsession. I was wondering if you'd be willing to help me teach him a lesson he'll never forget." I stared at the message for a long minute. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate and selfish request. With a deep sigh, I pressed send. I expected silence. What I didn't expect was for my phone to vibrate with a response in less than 15 minutes. "Lisandro. I remember who you are. Your proposal is, indeed, incredibly strange. It's also intriguing. Meet me tomorrow at 4 p.m. at my restaurant. Enter through the back door. Don't waste my time." The next day, I stood in front of the discreet service door of Alma. A young cook opened the door and led me through the kitchen to a small glass office. There was Alara, even more impressive in person than in photos. She wore the white chef's uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. There was no trace of makeup on her face, just flawless skin and dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. "Lisandro," she said, her voice as crisp as the sound of a knife being sharpened. "You have 10 minutes to convince me you're not as crazy as your brother. Speak." I told her everything. My workshop, my passion for wood, the hotel project. I told her about Maite, about the engagement party, about the conversation I saw between her and Nacho. I described the sabotage, the stolen designs, the phone call that destroyed my life. I told her about the confrontation with my family and how they had turned their backs on me. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the small office. "I know Ignacio," she said finally, her voice a little softer. "Or at least, I knew the boy who became the man you describe. Envy was always his engine. If someone had something he couldn't have, his first instinct wasn't to work to get it, but to try to snatch it away or devalue it." She straightened and her eyes locked onto mine again. "And what exactly do you propose? What do you want me to do?" "I want to create a narrative," I said, my voice sounding firmer now. "A story so public and so convincing that it completely eclipses his. I want them to see us together, not just as a couple, but as a team. Two successful, creative, and confident people. I want every time he tries to paint the picture of me as a failure, reality to hit him in the face with a photo of us at an event, a mention in a magazine, a shared success story. Alara studied me for a long moment. A tiny smile, almost imperceptible, drew at the corner of her lips. It's a bold and manipulative plan. He chose the rules, not me, I responded. She nodded slowly. What you're asking is no small thing. It involves my time, my public image, and drags me back into a drama I thought I'd left behind long ago. After a pause, she said, all right. I'll do it. But with my conditions. 1. This is a professional agreement. No emotions involved. We're partners in a project. 2. We have complete control of the narrative. Every public appearance, every post, will be planned. 3. When this ends, it ends. We return to our lives and don't look back. Agreed? Agreed, I said, feeling a wave of something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. The following 2 weeks were a strange mix of meticulous planning and constant performance. Alara and I met several times, not at her restaurant, but in discreet places. Each meeting was like a military strategy session. The key is subtlety, Alara told me in one of our meetings. We can't seem desperate or too obvious. The story we have to tell is of 2 people who found each other unexpectedly, 2 creative souls who connected on a deep level. It must seem organic, inevitable. We practiced our story. How we reconnected through a mutual friend from the art world. How a conversation about design and gastronomy turned into hours of talk. It was fiction, but as we built it, I found pieces of truth in it. I really did admire her passion, her iron discipline. The night of the event, I felt a knot of nerves in my stomach. The party for Alara's new seasonal menu launch would be filled with press and influential people. And I would be her guest of honor. I arrived at Alma at exactly 8:30 p.m. The place was packed. A murmur of animated conversations, the tinkling of glasses, and camera flashes filled the air. I made my way through the crowd, feeling strangely exposed. And then I saw her. Alara was in the center of the room, talking with a well-known gastronomic critic. She wasn't wearing her chef's uniform, but an elegant black dress that highlighted her figure. She laughed at something the critic said, and in that moment, she wasn't just a chef, she was a star. Our eyes met across the crowd. She smiled at me, a subtle but meaningful smile, and gestured for me to approach. I walked toward her, and just as I arrived, she put a hand on my arm in a way that seemed both natural and possessive. Federico, let me introduce Lisandro, she said, her voice clear and confident. He's the incredibly talented designer I told you about. The critic shook my hand. Ah, yes. Alara hasn't stopped talking about your work. She says you're a poet of wood. A pleasure to meet you. We talked for a few minutes, with Alara keeping her hand on my arm the entire time. It was a small gesture, but it was an anchor. It made me feel part of her world, not an intruder. And then I saw him. In a corner, near the entrance, was Ignacio. I don't know how he had gotten an invitation, probably snuck in with some acquaintance. He was with a couple of people, but his attention wasn't on them. His eyes were fixed on us, on Alara's hand on my arm. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw the shock, the confusion, and above all, the wound to his ego. The plan was working. The night continued as planned. Alara introduced me to several influential people, journalists, entrepreneurs, artists. In each introduction, she used carefully chosen phrases like Lisandro and I share the same philosophy about creation, or his approach to design inspires me in the kitchen. The crucial moment came when a photographer from a social magazine approached us. Alara, splendid as always. Would you mind a photo? And who is your handsome companion? Alara moved closer to me, her shoulder brushing mine. Of course, Miguel. He's Lisandro. And he's more than a companion. The camera flash blinded us for an instant. In that photo, which I knew would be in the magazine pages the following week, we weren't 2 strangers pretending. We were an image of success, of complicity, of power. Ignacio's counterattack didn't take long to arrive. 2 days after our photo was published, he posted something on his Instagram. It was an old photo of him and me as children, building a sandcastle on the beach. The accompanying text was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. No matter what happens in life, the turns the world takes or the decisions we make. You'll always be my little brother. And I'll always love and protect you, even from yourself. #family first #blood bonds. The post was flooded with likes and comments from family, friends and distant acquaintances. How beautiful, Nacho. You're a great brother. Family is the most important thing. I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of disgust and twisted admiration for his ability to twist reality. He was painting himself as the wise and hurt older brother, watching sadly as his little brother went astray. 2 days later, Alara made her move. She posted a photo on her own Instagram account. It was a professional-looking photo taken in my workshop. In it, I was working on a piece of wood, concentrated, with the evening light entering through the window. She was in the background, watching me with an expression of genuine admiration. The accompanying text was subtle but devastating to Ignacio's narrative, creativity in its purest form. There's something incredibly inspiring about seeing a true craftsman in his element, transforming raw material into soul. The world needs more creators and fewer critics. Honored to witness the magic of it, Lisandro Torres. Hashtag real art, hashtag passion, hashtag design. The response was immediate and overwhelming. But the real blow came in the comments. A distant cousin of ours, who clearly hadn't understood the subtext, commented on Alara's post, at Ignacio_Torres_real_estate, look how good your brother is. What a pride. Ignacio, unable to resist the temptation to control the conversation, responded, at Prima_Sophia, yes, a pride. I just hope he's getting the help he needs in these difficult times. Mental health is very important. It was the mistake Alara was waiting for. Before I could react, Alara responded directly to Ignacio's comment. Her response was a work of art of surgical precision. At Ignacio_Torres_real_estate, the only help an artist like Lisandro needs is an environment free of envy and sabotage. It's fascinating how some confuse a person's strength and resilience with instability, often to divert attention from their own actions. But, as I said, the world needs more creators. Talent, unlike other things, can't be faked. Boom. The bomb had exploded. Alara's comment received dozens of likes in the first few minutes, then hundreds more as her followers and food industry contacts began to engage. People started connecting the dots. An old university friend commented, "Wow, Alara, what elegance in putting someone in their place." Another design industry acquaintance wrote, "Sabotage? That explains some rumors I've heard." Ignacio didn't respond again. He deleted his comment about 20 minutes later, but the damage was done. The conversation had changed. It was no longer about poor Nacho worried about his unstable brother. Now whispers circulated about envy, about sabotage. We had won the social media battle. Meanwhile, a much quieter drama was unfolding privately. I didn't know about it until a week later, when I received a call from an unknown number. It was Felipe, and Maite was with him. She wanted to talk to me but didn't dare call. After some hesitation, I agreed to listen. "Lisandro?" Maite's voice was trembling and fragile. "I know you probably hate me, and you have every right. I was a coward and a fool." She continued, her voice about to break. "I've seen the photos, the posts, what Alara said about the sabotage. At first, I didn't want to believe it. But then I started remembering small things. The way Nacho always belittled you with jokes. The way he looked at you when you talked about your work with passion." She made a pause, taking a breath. "The conversation we had at the party. He didn't tell me childhood stories, Lisandro. He spent half an hour putting it in my head that you were embarrassed by me, that your friends and clients saw me as a simple small-town teacher who wasn't up to your level. He told me that, as soon as you had success, you'd leave me for someone from your world." Every word she said was like a piece of a horrible puzzle falling into place. He hadn't just attacked me, he had attacked her, exploiting her deepest insecurities to turn her against me. "When you broke up," her voice was barely a whisper, "he behaved like my savior. He told me he had rescued me from an unhappy future. And I, in my pain and confusion, believed him." "And what has changed now, Maite?" I asked finally, my voice devoid of emotion. "The money," she said bluntly. "The money I gave him. A week after everything," she explained, Nacho called her crying. "He told her that one of my lenders was threatening me over a debt, that I was in serious trouble. He begged her to lend him money to help me, to save my skin without me knowing, so as not to hurt my pride. I gave him my life savings, Lisandro. Almost $15,000. He promised he'd return it in a month. Yesterday I called to ask about the money, and he got furious. He screamed at me, told me I was crazy, that he had never asked me for anything. And then he blocked me." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. I could imagine the scene, the realization dawning on Maite's face. The raw and ugly truth. "I'm so sorry, Lisandro," she sobbed. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I destroyed what we had by believing a monster. I just wanted you to know that I know the truth." I hung up the phone shortly after. I didn't offer forgiveness or reconciliation. It was too late for that. But the call had changed something inside me. The burning anger I felt toward Maite had dissolved, replaced by a kind of melancholic sadness. She wasn't a villain in my story. She was another victim, caught in the same web of deceit as I was. That night, I told Alara about the conversation. We were sitting in my workshop, the space dimly lit by a single work lamp. She listened without judgment, her hand resting gently on my arm. "She was brave to call," Alara said quietly. "It couldn't have been easy to admit she was wrong, especially knowing you might hang up on her." "I almost did," I admitted. Part of me wanted to. But hearing her voice, hearing how broken she sounded, I realized that staying angry at her was like carrying poison in my own veins. Alara nodded, understanding. "Ignacio is skilled at finding people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. With you, he used your family's dynamics, their tendency to see you as the strong one who doesn't need protection. With Maite, he used her insecurities about not belonging in your world." I picked up a piece of sandpaper and began smoothing the edge of a oak board, the repetitive motion helping me think. The strangest part is that I can see now how he's been doing this our whole lives. Small things, little undermining comments disguised as brotherly teasing. He was always testing boundaries, seeing how much he could get away with. Narcissists are like that, Alara said, moving to examine the grain of the wood I was working on. They're expert manipulators because they've been practicing since childhood. They learn to read people, to find exactly the right pressure points. I set down the sandpaper and looked at her. In the warm light of the workshop, she looked contemplative, almost vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. Can I ask you something personal? I said. Of course. When you were with him, did you ever feel like you were going crazy? Like your own perception of reality was wrong? Her expression darkened slightly. All the time. He had this way of making me question myself. If I got upset about something he said or did, he'd make me feel like I was overreacting, being too sensitive. He'd twist conversations until I wasn't sure if I had misunderstood or if he was deliberately being cruel. She sat down on my workbench, her legs swinging slightly. The worst part was how he made me feel guilty for my success. Every achievement, every good review of my cooking, somehow became a threat to him. He'd sulk, make passive-aggressive comments about how I was too busy for our relationship, or how I was changing and becoming cold and ambitious. Why did you stay as long as you did? Because I kept thinking it was my fault. That if I just tried harder, was more understanding, more supportive, things would get better. It took me months after we broke up to realize that nothing I could have done would have been enough. The problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough for him, it was that he couldn't handle being with someone who was successful in their own right. I reached out and took her hand. I'm sorry you went through that. Don't be. It taught me valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation. And it led me to you, eventually. She smiled, squeezing my hand. Though I have to admit, when you first messaged me, part of me wondered if you might be like him. What convinced you I wasn't? The way you talked about your work, your genuine pain about what had happened. Ignacio never spoke about anything with real passion except his grievances. You spoke about your craft the way I speak about cooking, like it was part of your soul. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the night sounds filtering through the workshop windows. Then Alara spoke again. There's something else about that phone call from Maite that you should consider. What's that? The fact that she called it all means she's breaking free from his influence. She's choosing truth over the comfortable lie he sold her. That takes courage. I nodded, feeling a strange sort of peace settling over me. You're right. And maybe that's why I didn't feel angry anymore. She made the hard choice to face reality, even when it meant admitting she was wrong. Exactly. And that's what separates victims from accomplices. Victims, when they see the truth, they choose it, even when it's painful. Accomplices choose the lie because it's easier. That conversation shifted something fundamental in how I viewed the whole situation. It wasn't just about my brother's betrayal anymore, it was about recognizing the patterns, understanding how manipulation works, and choosing to break free from cycles that had been going on for years. It took weeks for the full weight of everything to hit me. The anger didn't just disappear overnight, it came in waves, sometimes catching me off guard while I was working, or when I saw couples at restaurants. There were nights I woke up furious, and others when I felt nothing but emptiness. The transition wasn't immediate or magical. There were setbacks, awkward silences, and moments when old patterns almost reasserted themselves. My mother still occasionally slipped into defending Ignacio out of habit, catching herself mid-sentence. My father struggled with expressing emotions he'd suppressed for decades. But slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild. Not the old relationship, that was gone forever, but something new. Something based on honesty rather than comfortable lies. My father paid Maite's debt from the money he had been secretly saving for my mother's anniversary gift. We heard from neighbors that Ignacio had moved to Guadalajara, though he still occasionally posted on social media, always from new jobs, new apartments, new attempts at reinventing himself. But the real reconstruction, the true gift that arose from the ashes, was Alara. What had started as a strategic alliance had become something real and beautiful. Our fake relationship had grown into genuine love, a love born from mutual respect, shared passion for our crafts, and the understanding that we were both creators who had found their perfect complement. 6 months later, we bought a house in the countryside with a large garden for her aromatic herbs and a huge barn that I converted into my new workshop. We lived surrounded by silence, the smell of wet earth and freshly cut wood. This morning, I woke up with the sun entering through our bedroom window. Alara still slept beside me, her breathing deep and peaceful. As I prepared coffee in the kitchen, my gaze settled on the kitchen table, a table I built for us, made of oak recovered from an old hacienda. It's solid, rustic, and full of the marks of our life together. I thought about the man I was a year ago. A man about to marry, with a promising career, who thought he had his life perfectly assembled. That man had no idea of the fragility of his own constructions. Ignacio's betrayal wasn't an act of destruction, it was an act of demolition. It tore down the facade I had built, forcing me to examine the foundations. And the foundations were rotten, weakened by years of silence, compromise, and toxic family dynamics. I used to think that a man's value lay in the things he built with his hands. Now I know that's not true. True value lies in his capacity to rebuild himself. Revenge gave me justice, yes. It exposed the truth and gave me back my name. But it didn't give me peace. I found peace in the process that came after. In the late conversations, in the forgiveness I gave myself, and above all, in the quiet and steady love I found with Alara. She came downstairs, yawning, her hair tousled by sleep. She smiled at me, a sleepy and beautiful smile that remains my favorite thing in the world. "It smells like coffee," she murmured. "And wood," I responded, wrapping my arms around her. "It smells like home." And as I held her, with the morning sun flooding our kitchen, I knew, with certainty as solid as the noblest wood, that I was no longer just a furniture craftsman. I had become, by necessity and by grace, the architect of my own life. And this time, the foundations were unbreakable.